It's such fun to see this amazing crowd from all over the world. Thank you everybody so much for joining us, and such fun to be doing this with our TEDx colleagues, with the TED colleagues, with Leaders Quest, with Future Stewards. So thrilled to be here and can't wait to share this program with you, and very happy to be doing this with Bruno, who is the chief of putting so much of this amazing program together. Let me just start by saying a little bit about what you can expect from this session. So we want you to walk away really excited and fired up about curating your own event. We're giving you, as Caroline said, a sneak peek of the program content, and we're going to talk you through that in some detail. I want you to remember that this is embargoed till Monday, so this really is your own private sneak peek, kind of in the family. And on Monday, we'll be going live with a press release. We'll be going live on our website with links to all the speakers. But for now, this is our secret, and we're asking you to just use this material for your own purposes, but not disclose it publicly. Okay, so that's the first request. And as we go through, we're going to take you through the main sessions of the program and give you a feel for that. So if we could start to share some slides. Great. So I just want to give you the highlights. If we click onto the next slide for me. So the quick details, the overview of what is going to happen on Saturday the 10th of October that's going to then enable you to do all of your wonderful events. So Saturday the 10th is a half-day event, starts at 11 a.m. East Coast time, will run till about 4:30 East Coast time. It's broken into 5 large sessions, and we're going to describe those in a moment for you. It's all been pre-produced, so we've done, I think the team has done an incredible job creating TED Talks, interviews, animations, filmed all over the world. We've kind of taken advantage of the fact that we couldn't travel and are really bringing to life stories and talks from all over the world, filmed in people's local settings. And it's going to be hosted live. So we've got over 55 pieces to share with you on the day, and that you'll be able to draw upon. In 9 languages. We're purposefully wanting to make this as accessible as possible, and we've got surprise, well-known hosts hosting each of these 5 sessions. It's going to be available free all over the world on YouTube starting at 11 a.m. that day, but even more importantly is all of you, the power of TEDx organizers, existing organizers, and new organizers all over the world. So if we look at the next slide, we've got a beautiful map of the world. We're at 400 plus countdown TEDx events already. We are expecting to get to over 500. We're thrilled to have so many of you with us today. I think of all the things that we're really excited about, the power of this wonderful crew to bring to life Countdown's message, to bring to life the need for addressing climate change and solutions to climate change all over the world is probably the most exciting piece of this whole program. So we're very, very excited by the power that you're all going to bring in the days and weeks that follow on from the 10th of October. Now, a few quick details on our next slide. So I want to just take you through the main sessions. They're running more or less for an hour each, and we've really built this very carefully in terms of a flow and a story. So we begin with urgency. Why now? You know, what do we mean by countdown? What is the climate science? We've got some fantastic talks and animations to bring that to life for everybody who tunes in. What do we mean by the race to zero? The race to halve our greenhouse gas emissions in the next 10 years and then to get to zero well before 2050. Where are we in that race? Climate justice, the complete interconnectedness of all of these issues. And then we move to a second session, which is really focused on leadership. Putting climate back on the global political and social agenda, especially in the wake of the pandemic. How do we combine recovering from a pandemic and doing that in a way that is healthy and sustainable and really listens to nature and what the world is telling us? What can businesses do? Examples of what businesses are doing to transform and transition their companies, bringing that to life. How do we need companies, small and large, to step up? Rethinking our cities. What does it mean to lead a city, to lead a community? What are some of the most thoughtful cities all over the world already doing, and what can the rest of us learn from that? Our third session is about transformation. How do we really transform many of our most important sectors? electrifying the way we move people and things and goods. They really rapid acceleration of electrification of everything and doing that cleanly. Decarbonizing fossil fuels, some really interesting thinking about how we take carbon out of the fossil fuels that we're still using. And then the special case of Africa, so paying attention to different geographies. How do we make sure that we go about the changes we need to make in a way that is equitable and allows different parts of the world to grow and for people to step into fruitful and flourishing lives all over the planet. Our fourth session is about breakthroughs, different kinds of technological breakthroughs. So what do we do? What does that mean in terms of protecting and regenerating nature? What are some of the ways that we need to think differently about this beautiful planet that we share? And how do we go about protecting it? How do we reimagine the built environment, the stuff that we use, concrete, steel? What does it look like to take carbon out of the way in which we make goods and the stuff that we use every day? And how do we spark a worldwide shift to a healthier food system? And then finally, action. How do we help everybody who participates in Countdown move to action? And how do we drive action amongst those around us, especially amongst leaders? So what does it mean to think long term about climate change? What does it mean to step up at work and at home? Some very clear opportunities that you'll be able to give to your communities in terms of stepping up. How do we think about how each of our countries are doing in terms of their commitments in the run up to the UN Climate Conference next year? And how can everybody get involved, stay inspired, rally others to take part, and perhaps most importantly, do it in a way that fits with our own personal responsibility. Some of us have much bigger carbon footprints, some of us have more opportunity to make change than others, and we want to be super thoughtful about messages that are really tailored to people depending on their lifestyles, depending on their circumstances in different parts of the world. So that's a quick run through of the 5.5-hour program that we're putting together. It's going to be available to you, as you know, 24 hours in advance. It's going to be available in 9 languages. You'll be able to download all these different modules, these 55 different pieces, and then play around with how you curate that to create your own event. And I'm going to pass to Bruno now to bring to life some of those elements, some of the talks, some of the animations, and then to give you some guidance on how you think about curating, because one of the brilliant things about this, but almost one of the challenges, is we've brought together so much wonderful material that you're kind of spoilt for choice. You can't go wrong. Everybody's going to do something different. And we really want to give you every opportunity to create your own amazing program that works for your community. So Bruno, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay, and hi, everyone. So from the moment we started, about 30 people have joined. So let me remind everybody, but especially for those 30, that what I'm going to show now and talk about is confidential. It's only among us 360 people here until Monday, 11 a.m. New York, 5 p.m. Europe, evening India, etc., etc. So that's our moment for releasing to the public. And then just to add to the 9 languages point, talks are going to be available in 9 languages, but that means subtitling, not dubbing. So most of the talks, with maybe the exception of one, maybe, are going to be in English, subtitled in those languages. So the way we have been looking at this is really 360 degrees, like we always do at TED. So we have been looking at climate from the perspective, of course, of energy production, of industry, of urban planning, of mobility, of nature, forests, biodiversity, oceans, and of food and agriculture, and so on. And we are trying to cover at least a little aspect of all of these themes within the program of October 10. We can't go deep on everything, but we can go quite a way on most of them. And we're going to do it through several different formats that are partially the same kind of formats that we normally have at TED, which means one person stands up and talks and tells a story. And that's a typical stage to audience approach. But of course, because we are not in a stage to audience context, we have been doing it in many different ways. Just 10 minutes before this call, I got a picture of one of our guests, one of our speakers, filming his talk under an oak tree, an old oak tree in the middle of a park in England. And that speaker is Prince William. You're gonna see his name in the list that comes up in a moment. And so, but we also added things that we could not do or not so directly if we were in a theater. We have a series of animations. We have a series of talks that include the speaker and the animation in the same video. We have remote interviews and other things like that. So the 5 sessions that Lindsay has shown, each one lasts about an hour, 10 minutes. And they are going to be a mix of different talks and contributions of different length. Some of them are a speaker for 10 minutes on a topic. Some of them are 2 people interviewed for 5 minutes. Some of them are literally 1 minute explaining, for example, a crucial scientific concept or a crucial concept when it comes to the climate crisis. Why are we focusing on 1.5 degrees, for example, or so? And all that is going to be mixed in the typical TED style, which for those of you who are not familiar with, it's more of a transversal, horizontal approach rather than a vertical. We will not have a session only on, say, the economy. We will not have a session only on finance. We're going to have a session that's about leadership, and leadership touches the leadership that politicians can provide, the leadership that businesses and the economy and business leaders can provide, but also the leadership that each of us can provide. So we try to go in that direction and mix different angles around broad topics, and especially the 5 that you have seen in the previous slide with the description of the sessions. The way we are going to distribute this to you is, as Lindsay said, through making available every single piece. There may be 55 or 54 or 56, it depends, because we're still negotiating a couple of things. So don't stick to the 55 number, but we're going to be there around. And each one is going to be available as a single piece of video that you can then organize and structure as you want, which means that you can create your own program lasting 30 minutes, 1 hour, or 5 hours and a half if you want, which is the length approximately of hours. And that depends on the way you want to imagine that. As you already know, you can add to the speakers we suggest and to the videos we put at your disposal also your own local speaker in your local language. That's part of your curation. So if you can go to the next slide, I'm gonna lead you through a series of themes. These are not the sessions; these are the themes that we have tried to cover in the program. So first of all, there is one short mandatory piece that each TEDx event is asked to show at the beginning of their program. It's a short intro that says a couple of things, that says what Countdown is and why we are doing it, of course, but also says what TEDx is and how TEDx relates to TED and to the big TED platform. And this is because we cannot assume that everybody who is participating in your event knows Countdown and knows TED and knows how TEDx and TED relate. And so there is one mandatory piece that is actually a very short video, but each one of you is asked to show at the beginning of any program you do, long or short. Then we recommend, it's not mandatory, but we recommend that you open the event with a talk by Johan Rockström, who is the director of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research and possibly one of the leading climate scientists in the world today. It's a beautiful talk, and his role in this program is essentially to explain the status of climate science and the status of the climate crisis in one single talk. And that's what it does beautifully. And essentially, it lays the scene for anything that comes afterwards. Then afterwards, you can build up towards a more business-oriented approach, or a more politically oriented approach, or a more social justice approach, or a more scientific approach, you choose. But this talk would essentially create a sort of introduction for everybody to be at the same level, to be all brought at the same level about the essential elements of the state of climate today. We also recommend another video to close the event, which is a short call to action that we are going to put at your disposal. No obligation to use it, but it's an interesting way to potentially close the event. Maybe not as the last piece, maybe just the piece before the last, to invite people to participate in a series of actions and so on. Now, the next few slides are gonna give you some themes that you can use for informing your thinking. We have brought together a series of talks, of course, about science. The one I mentioned from Johan Rockström, but also another one from Angel Xu, who is in Singapore right now, about the impact that climate has on cities and what cities can do concerning climate. She's a climate scientist, but also a data scientist, so there are a lot of data in her talk, and a lot of maps as well. And very interesting insights about how climate, for example, touches different parts of cities in different ways, and so on. We are also producing 5 short experiment animations. These are short videos, around 1 minute each, that try to explain in simple terms those 5 questions that you see there on the screen. So one way we use this is that we distributed them across the program. At a certain point in the program, there's a talk that talks about getting to net zero by 2050. Well, we need to explain what net zero is. We cannot assume that people know this kind of concepts, right? We are aiming for a broad audience. And so we have a short video that explains net zero, and so on and so forth. And these are going to be distributed across the 5 sessions. We're going to have a talk by Miles Allen from the University of Oxford, for example, about this notion that may sound a bit strange: decarbonizing fossil fuels, not decarbonizing the economy, not decarbonizing a product like a consumer product, but decarbonizing fossil fuels at the origin. It's a pretty surprising kind of talk. So there are there are other talks about science, not only this, but just to give you a glimpse on the kind of things we are preparing, touching specifically the science. Then we touch, and this is the next slide, we touch the economy, of course. And there are many different angles there. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, is going to talk about the European approach, which is encapsulated in a project called the European Green Deal, but not only, there are other pieces to it. And she's also going to talk about how the pandemic and the disruption it has provoked presents actually an obligation to act differently and to use this to accelerate the transition rather than slowing down the transition towards a cleaner future. Rebecca Henderson is a professor at the Harvard Business School, and she's going to talk about reimagining capitalism, what's wrong with capitalism, and how actually, rather than giving up on capitalism, we should fix it, because that's also one tool to fix the climate problem. We're going to have interventions by a couple of maybe 3 top executives from big companies, and specifically the CEO and the CSO of IKEA, the CSO, Chief Sustainability Officer of Apple, and possibly one more. And of course, those are mostly interviews, and we are asking them to explain to us, what their companies are doing, what they're not doing, why they're not doing it, and what their plans are going forward, and so on. And we're also going to talk about the intersection of technology and policy, so how they reinforce each other, with John Doerr, who is a big investor from Silicon Valley, and Hal Harvey, who is a policy expert. Somebody just unmuted, so please mute yourself again. The next one is about cities. Cities, you have already seen in the Angel Xu example that we are going to put a strong angle on cities. You all know that about 55% of the population in the world lives in cities, and that percentage is growing. Cities have a lot of different aspects when it comes to climate. Of course, the obvious aspects: infrastructure, climate, air conditioning, all these things, but also things that are broader, things like heat islands, for example, the variation of heat between and among different parts of a city, or between a city and the surrounding countryside, etc. So we're going to approach this in different ways. We're going to approach this through a talk, for example, by the mayor of Freetown, Yvonne Eki-Sawyer, who has this vision for turning Freetown into a tree town. But we also want to approach it with the vision of Colombian architect working in France, Carlos Moreno, who has this idea about reimagining cities around a 15 minutes walk or bike ride, and making sure that every aspect that makes urban life compelling, access to food and school and culture and work and so on, and leisure and parks, is within 15 minutes of walking or biking from anywhere in a city. But we're also going to look at how do you transform the materials that surround us. There are many materials that are all around us and we don't notice anymore, but they all have significant carbon footprint. One of them is cement and concrete. So concrete produces about 8% of the total global carbon emissions. And it's not a material we can get rid of, because we need bridges and we need roads and we need houses, but we can try to reinvent it. And it turns out there are actually a dozen different attempts around the world to reinvent cement, to figure out a different way to have the same characteristics in the product, but with a much smaller footprint. And so we have actually chosen here to have two different talks, one from academia and one from a company, explaining two different approaches on how to get there. And then, of course, there's a big question about transportation. How do we electrify everything? And when we talk about transport, we don't think only about, everybody should get a Tesla, which is not what should be suggested. We are thinking about everything that involves transportation. So from the bicycle and the tricycle up to the car and the truck and the bus and the train and so on. How do we get to electrify all that? And are there signs that we're actually moving fast on that or not? We need to transform big systems as well. We need to transform the way we produce our food, for example. And this is not going to be a talk. This is going to be an animation, which has been written by Brent Loken, who's an expert in the field, but an animation that tries to imagine what should a sustainable food production of the future look like. What kind of choices should we do in the north as well as in the south, and so on. We need to transform the way we power the economy. And so Varun Sivaram is going to talk about, well, India right now is using coal and growing its use of coal in an exponential way, but there are other ways to grow the Indian economy without using coal. And it kind of explains a plan in his talk. Rose Mutiso is an energy researcher from Kenya, and she will make the case that Africa, having a very small carbon footprint so far, but also having a relatively very small, comparatively very small economy, needs to be given priority concerning the remaining carbon budget in order to be able to develop. We're going to talk about nature and about forest, about restoration and conservation of forest at big scale. We're going to talk about housing and about local communities with Ernestine Leikeki and Rava and Zalalem in the US. Three local activists who are actually trying to involve their community through projects related to housing and through projects related to reforesting and the gender equality, involving them in the discussion about climate and transforming their local reality. And then we're gonna touch upon the human spirit. So the aspects that are not technical, are not scientific, they are related to us as humans, us as activists, or as thinkers, or as personalities and leaders. And let me tell you a little bit about this list, because there are many fascinating pieces here. Severn Collins Suzuki is an activist from Canada, and 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, she went to the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, the first big global climate conference, and the first one that captured the imagination of the public. And she gave a talk. She was 12 years old at the time. She gave a talk that sounded exactly like Greta Thunberg's talks today. And she had kind of an impact, and then things kind of went in a different direction. So we reached out to her and we asked her essentially to look back at herself 30 years ago and reflect on what has happened in these 30 years and where we are today. And so the talk we have prepared actually has elements of her original talk and elements of her today. Roman Snaric is a philosopher, and he's going to talk about thinking long-term, one thing that many seem to have a hard time doing, particularly people in position of leadership, and how can we think long-term, which is the challenge that climate asks us to tackle. David Lammy is a member of the British Parliament, and he's originally from Guyana. And he has prepared a very powerful talk about the intersection between climate and social and racial justice. And he makes the parallel between the current fight for racial justice in the North and the fight for climate justice in the South, and how those two things are actually strictly connected. This is a really powerful talk that's probably going to surprise a lot of people. Christiana Figueres was the person who led the development of the Paris Agreement in 2015. She's given a TED Talk telling that story several years ago. She's back with a TED Talk about being a stubborn optimist. That's the way she calls herself and she defines herself. And she's trying to create a small movement or a big movement around stubborn optimists. But her point is the climate challenge feels big, huge, complex, impossible, but actually we can make it. And her talk tries to make the case for that. Sophie Howe is the only future generations commissioner in a government in the world. She is with the government of Wales, and her task is to make sure that every policy and every decision taken by the government of Wales takes into account the interests of future generations. And then we have Prince William, who is actually filming his talk as we speak in a park in England, and he's going to talk about the decade of action, so the decade that starts now and goes to 2030, and the urgency of it, and he has some interesting, insightful views about it. So those are some of the talks. They're not all. These are 5 slides, 5 talks, so about half of what we have in store for you. But you see the diversity, right? And everything you have seen so far in these 5 slides are longish talks. They go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes each, except for the 5 short animations I mentioned at the beginning. But we do have also shorter pieces. And as I mentioned if we go to the next slide, as I mentioned at the beginning, when we talked about those 5 animations, the way we look at that is when you curate your program, you want to create a program that, of course, you feel strongly about in terms of content, but you want to make sure that you create a flow that is not a series of blocks, right? It's not 5 talks of 10 minutes, one after the other, or 10 talks of 10 minutes, one after the other. You want to modulate the rhythm, you want to modulate the format, so maybe 2 talks and then an interview or a performance, and you want to modulate the length. So if you decide to go for 3 heavy talks, 1 about science, 2 about the economy, then maybe you want to add 3 minutes of levity, of beautiful images, for example, like the ones that Stephen Wilkes, the photographer, has prepared for us. It's a sort of artist meditation on climate, but because he's a photographer, he has created it around his beautiful imagery. Same thing for Andri Magnusson down at the bottom of the left list, who is a poet and writer from Iceland. And he literally talks from a glacier in Iceland and tells a beautiful story there. So you want to consider these short pieces as a way to structure a program and give it rhythm and texture rather than just block after block as if they were bricks. Lindsay mentioned the Race to Zero at the beginning. The Race to Zero is an initiative to try to encourage organizations, cities, governments, businesses, but also individuals to adhere or to join this race, essentially, to join and commit to accelerating towards zero emission by net zero by 2050, if possible, possibly before. And we're going to have a short video presenting it and explaining what it is and why people should join. We'll have the political aspect, we'll have the activist aspect, and possibly, we hope, a surprising guest introducing it. There are also a couple of other pieces that may be worth mentioning. One is Becoming an Activist, which is a piece about 4 young activists from around the world, introduced and presented by Al Gore, who explained why they became an activist and how they became an activist. Another one is an animation by Niklas Höhne, who is a scientist from Germany, giving specific data about what did countries commit to when they signed the Paris Agreement, and are they on track to fulfill that commitment or not? Mostly, the short answer is mostly they are not. And the other short answer is mostly their original commitments are not even sufficient, even if they kept them. But this piece is going to give you specific data about that. And then we have a couple of other artists like Elif Shafak, the Turkish novelist, of Olafur Eliasson, the Danish, Icelandic visual artist, preparing short artists' interventions, let's call them like that, which they did essentially as a contribution to the discussion. So, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, Bruno, this is a brilliant introduction, and I'm conscious I'm watching this stream of tons of amazing questions.
Exactly, and since and I think it's finished, right? The next answer, next slide should be exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. So take all that, mix and match it, and create your program. That's it.
So, brilliant. So I'm just going to add a couple of things, Bruno. As you can see, this is an incredibly rich mix of content, and I'm conscious, especially as I look at the questions, that people, you know, are kind of almost overwhelmed with how much there is here. So I just want to make a couple of points before handing to the TEDx team to lead us through the most important questions. One is we're seeing this as a launch. So Countdown is going to continue to work through next year. After the launch, we'll be engaging with you in different ways with circles and a bunch of other stuff that will come next year. So from our perspective, this is a launch. We're very conscious that we're sharing lots and lots of material. I want to just really encourage you. The quality of the talks is fantastic. The team have done an amazing job pulling all of this together. I know you're itching to kind of get your hands on it, and of course we're just finishing all the production. So on Monday you will get your host kit, lots more detail in the host kit. I can see lots of people asking about the length of the talks, which we'll provide for you. As Bruno said, they range from 5 to 10 minutes. We've been very disciplined. We've taken big complicated ideas and got them brilliantly boiled down into 8, 9, 10 minutes to really make the best use of people's time. Another question I can see come popping up is how you think about organizing. So you will remember that on the Countdown website, we talk about 5 big questions about the future of energy and transport and materials and food and nature. And that is one lens that you can apply. In putting together our whole show, we ended up you know, starting with urgency and working our way through breakthrough and so on, the slide that I took you through earlier, and we'll bring that to life also in the host kit. And then what Bruno's just done for you is to kind of show another way of slicing this all up by saying which pieces relate to the economy, which pieces relate to cities, which pieces relate to the human spirit. So what you'll find as you look at the host kit and as you see the full published list of speakers is that there's just an incredible richness. And I guess my encouragement to you would be, you kind of can't go wrong. There's a lot of great stuff here. You'll probably feel that there's far more than you can fit in, but it's going to be available afterwards as well. And part of what we've tried to do is to create materials that really work here and now in October, but also that people can continue to enjoy and use in the months that come.
Okay, we are at time. Lindsay and Bruno, I'll give you guys the final word, but again, I just want to thank you so much for being here, and Will, Michael, thank you for answering all of our questions.
Bruno?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody who is in this discussion and who's been listening in and asking questions. Thank you for your engagement with this. It's really important that you're part of this, but it's also really important that we all together push these solutions and push these ideas out to the world. The urgency is there. It's actually increasing by the day. If you're in California and you look out of your window, you know what I'm talking about. So thank you for participating and being part of this. Any question you have, reach out to us, to Will and Caroline, but also to me and Lindsay, and we're happy to answer.
Yeah, just echoing the thanks. It's fantastic to be part of this amazing community. I'm really, really excited about what we're going to do together in October onwards, and couldn't be prouder to be working with you all. Thank you.
All right, see all of you soon. Good luck on your countdown events. Thank you again, Lindsay and Bruno.